I joined the Black Hebrew Israelites because I was biblically illiterate. And then I read the Bible, and then I left the Hebrew Israelite Church.
Jesus belongs to Africa as much as he does to Europe and Asia. And Jesus was not a white man like me, nor was he as black as some of you. We don't know what the color of his skin, but it must have been a dark color like the people of his day, because he was a man like them. Don't ever say it's a white man's religion or a black man's religion. It's a world religion. He belongs to the world. Jesus belongs to Africa, to Europe and Asia. Jesus belongs to the world.
Sir, I don't use Strong's Concordance. I teach Hebrew. See, I'm sorry. Strong's Exhaustive Concordance is not an inspired source. It's very dated, and I'm sorry, but anyone who's dependent upon that is going to stumble many, many times. It's just, I just highly recommend to you actually learning the language. It would help a lot.
God has answered your prayer. You said, why doesn't he send the Spirit of truth? He did. He sent Jesus. And when Jesus left, he sent the Holy Spirit, according to John 13 through 15. So what you're asking for, God has done in the person of Jesus. And guess what? How did the world receive Jesus, Sonetta? They didn't receive him. They crucified him. And if they could, a lot of them would crucify him again. Hear what you're saying? But he's done it. And that's the beauty of Jesus, is he's saying, you deserve judgment. I'll take the judgment. So the Son takes the judgment that we all deserve. That's the beautiful thing, Sonetta, because none of us can pay for our own sin.
To the world.
How many roads, too many signs, I can't read them. Wouldn't recognize the turn even if I seen it. Been driving all along, feel like I'm dreaming. Okay.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. That's right. Welcome to Street Apologists Live. January 27th, 2025. It's around 8:25. Phoenix, Arizona time, which means mountain time these days. I'm going to be joined tonight by a special guest, Faithful to God, as we talk about a recent multi-part, I think 8 episodes, podcast, serial, storytelling, epic drama produced by Sports Illustrated called Spiraled, where they go after Straitway and Charles Dowell. Welcome, my name is Vocab Malone. I'm the host of Street Apologists Live. This show will serve the underserved and look into the overlooked. And you know how we do things. We cover Christian theology, Bible doctrine, urban apologetics. It's live. We usually run an hour and a half or so. A lot of what we cover is Hebrew Israelism. And this time, Sports Illustrated has also covered Hebrew Israelism. Can you believe it? You've got them covering Hebrew Israelism in this really interesting joint they did. Let me see if I can get Faithful to sound off on this. Faithful to God. Before we get started, tell people how to find your material online. You're mainly on Clubhouse these days. Tell people where you're at, my man. You're muted, though. There you go. Yeah.
Yeah, there we go. There. Yes. So shout out to Vocab Malone. You guys can find me on YouTube at Faithful to God. You can find me on Instagram and Clubhouse by typing in Faithful to God. And I'm just glad to be here, man.
All right. So I think recently you asked me, you said, hey, what kind of shows are you thinking about doing or covering? And I said, well, I'm thinking about doing this one on Charles Dowell and Straitway with the Sports Illustrated podcast. And you said, wait, what? You remember that when I first told you? What was that? Was that last week? When was that?
Yeah, that was about like last week. Yeah.
And so you pretty much listened to it all like in what, one day?
Yeah, man, I made it all the way through, man. I even listened to the bonus episodes.
And so you've done this pretty recently, so it's like fresh on the mind, as it were. And
Yes.
I'm gonna put it right there. There's what it looks like. That's the cover image right there. And what it is a multi-part podcast series produced by Sports Illustrated. It's real high quality. Mainly Kalyn Kahler, but producer Buffy Gorilla was involved. The reason I knew this was dropping, Faithful, is because they actually interviewed me for it twice. So I guess in my own ego, I thought, hey, look, if they interview me twice, I'm probably gonna, like end up, right? I'm probably gonna end up in the podcast. I should part of my interview, but nope, I didn't make it in there. I wasn't in the. I never made it. They did interview me twice, and they did utilize some of the things I said, but they never used me in any of the audio clips. Now, if you were going to recommend this, why, Faithful, do you think people should listen to Spiraled, Sports Illustrated's deep dive into Charles Dowell and Straitway? Why do you think they should listen to this?
Oh man, I definitely recommend this if anybody is interested in finding out about the former NFL player Kabeer and what happened with him, and just finding out the history of this group, finding out the history of Dowell. Who did he learn under? Hearing the stories from people that were there. There were several former members that were interviewed for the podcast. And just overall, I would say if you're really interested in seeing a group that is not a Camp Hebrews-like group, but still has really sketchy, I would say even questionable things, and why this is important, I would say, is because they're not so overtly out there like some of the camps. Like the Camp Hebrews-lites, they're like outrageously racist. Dowell is much more reserved, at least it seems like, on the outward. But the podcast reveals so many things about him that I was shocked. And I really think if you're interested in the subject of Hebrew Israelism, this podcast is for you. It's really informative, especially for his group.
No doubt, agree 100%. I want to briefly play here a video clip, Faithful, when Kalyn Kahler, the producer, she was on a sports talk show. So the funny thing is, a lot of people that have interviewed Kalyn about this podcast series are like people who follow, say, for example, NFC football, specifically the division that has the Packers and the Bears and the Lions, and of course, all those, powerful Midwest teams that are well known or constantly rivals the Vikings. And she's on these types of shows that especially cover that area of the NFL. And it's been funny to see because, they don't know anything about this stuff. And she's introducing them to this world. And their interest is because they're interested in Kabeer, Daniel Murr, Robert Mathis, TJ. They're interested in that. Primarily, usually it's Kabeer because he's in the Green Bay Packer Hall of Fame, for example. And even the cover image here of the Sports Illustrated series is kind of modeled a little bit after him. That's clearly like a Green Bay Packer type design. And the idea, of course, spiraled, you should be able to catch it, everybody. Where you got spiraled is, of course, the way you want to throw the football with the perfect spiral, so it's easier to catch. It even looks better. I don't think that's part of it, I'm just saying. And then spiraled, of course, the idea of the sort of religious
spiraling out of control
that these folks have done as they've got involved. Now, this is part 2 of Sports Illustrated taking on Dowell. Do you remember, what was it, back in 2020 that they did a 3-part series, Pray for Kabeer?
Yes.
And that was pretty intensive. Do you remember that series when it dropped? Now, they did quote me in that. They did quote me in that.
Yes, I do remember that series. Absolutely.
But I want to play this clip briefly. And in this clip, she's being interviewed by one of these shows. And it's the funniest thing because the guy's like, well, I watched some of this Dowell guy. And I was kind of surprised because the camera pans out and the guy's got an AR-15. And I just thought it was funny because, we're like used to this stuff, right, Faithful? But it's funny to like see somebody who's not as used to it be exposed to it the first time, and you get to see it again through fresh eyes. And so this clip just made me chuckle because I was like, oh yeah, they do things differently there, and this guy's seeing it for the first time. So this is the group that now has multiple NFL players in it, this Hebrew Israelite group called Straitway Truth Ministries. And they're out there in Tennessee, and one of their services is shown in this video, and I'm briefly going to play it here right now.
Charles Dowell. I found some video from the website Straitway, and this is Pastor Dowell preaching to his congregation. And then when the camera widens out, there's one of the, I'm assuming would call him an usher. He has what appears to be an AR-15 or automatic weapon. What's going on here? This is not my version of church.
Yeah, that is what they do. I mean, Pastor Dowell, anywhere he goes, he pretty much has at least one, usually multiple men like that who are either usually they're dressed in all black. Sometimes they're dressed in white if it's like.
So I just thought that was the funniest thing. Faithful, are you able to see? So, you got Dowell, right? And first of all, you learn a lot just from this little clip. You see that they have a band, they have like a choir. They're not opposed to music. Some of the groups are. You also see that they have black and white members. This is something everyone should be aware of with Dowell. You see that he does have fringes there on the bottom of his tailor-made suit or whatever. I don't think everyone has a suit like that. He's speaking with what looks like maybe a clicker, so he might have a PowerPoint. You got the speakers there. People got rapt attention, and they also have at least two camera angles because that's camera angle 1. Here's camera angle 2. It fades into it. And now, this isn't the end of the world. I imagine if someone from Straitway sees this, they'll be like, doesn't Vocab know about church shootings and stuff? Yeah, by the way, it's usually Christian churches getting shot up. No one's shooting up Hebrew Israelite churches, but whatever. Although there was a Hebrew Israelite who shot up a Christian church before, Marcus Chenault. And it's just funny to see the guy be that shocked by it, And then, of course,
that dude looks like he's about to play Call of Duty in the background, man. You know what I mean?
You see the rest of their setup. You see the Paleo Hebrew and the menorah and the sword. That's like on the little pulpit area there. And these aren't necessarily criticisms. These are just comments. And that was from Aldo Gandia. But it's just funny to hear him mention this. I just want to play
Charles
one time.
Dowell. I found some video from the website Straitway, and this is Pastor Dowell preaching to his congregation. And then when the camera widens out, there's one of the, I'm assuming would call him an usher. He has what appears to be an AR-15 or automatic weapon. What's going on here? This is not my version of church.
Yeah, that is what they do. I mean, Pastor Dowell, anywhere he goes, he pretty much has at least one, usually multiple men like that who are either usually they're dressed in all black. Sometimes they're dressed in white if it's like.
We'll talk about that in a second. Shout out to Servant of Christ. Everyone, please subscribe to his channel, SOC. He does great.
Shout out to the brother Jordan.
Yeah, former Hebrew Israelite himself, of course. And D. New makes the point, and again, this is just what they do. They out there with guns and fight classes. That's a big part of what they do down at Straitway is the kind of like military preparedness, military readiness. And Nate says, why does Dow look like he pities the fool with only one wife? Because I think Dow's got 4 now, if I'm not mistaken. And D-New's correct. They do have a praise team. Shout out to the best mods in the business, D-New and Nate 2D2. Yesterday was Nate's birthday. Feel free to send him money. Ask for his Cash App and send him money. Byron Bull, Hebrew Israelite, comes on and says, when are you going to do a show on why the Jews don't fit the scriptures as Israel? And D-New makes a great point. Hey, why don't you do that on your channel? Why do you get to set the agenda for the channel over here? But remember when she's talking briefly there about this thing where you've got Dowell with, security with him. Can you talk about the video where he was the Hebrew Man of the Year? Because that was probably the most epic video of all time where you know what I'm talking about? Go ahead.
Yeah, that was strange, man. Like he showed up like he was like low key like Will Smith or something, man. Like he had like this whole entourage.
Oh, it was before that.
You said Will Smith. To me, when I see it, I think it was more like he was like trying to be like a head of state.
Head of state, yeah, like the
Yeah.
president or something. It's like
Yeah.
low key crazy.
You know, Dowell recently has had quite a dust up, faithful. You know, this podcast dropped last year. I've been wanting to do it for a while. It dropped last year. But also last year, and this podcast hasn't made as much noise as I thought it might, and that's why we're doing tonight's show. But his big dust up, of course, was with the whole Rufus situation. And then you had like Ringo Starr going after him. Not Ringo Starr. What was the guy's name? Ringo TV. I'm sorry. That's the. And did you ever see the show he did where he was saying Dow had a virgin auction block?
Wait, hold on a second. Is this a thumbnail right here?
This is Ringo TV's thumbnail, and I think Naftali Israel shared it. This is
Is this like West Coast Snoop Dogg? Like you got the blowout like on the like what is that? I'm looking at Ringo on the left.
I mean, he's got some kind of, I can't tell what he's got going on. He does look like that right there. But this is, I think, his thumbnail. But I thought this was the funniest thumbnail. Danger Virgin Auction Block. And it's got the arrow with the girls and their heads down, and Dowell's like up there with his arms crossed. Did you ever watch any of those Ringo TV shows? I didn't get to watch very many of them.
Listen, Ringo's a little too crazy, I would say. But he does a lot of the commentary stuff regarding some of these different groups, even though he himself has really bad beliefs, you know.
Yeah, what's Ringo's deal? I don't know much about him.
So I'm trying to remember. He was involved with one of these Word of Faith name it and claim it groups, and then he fell into Hebrew Israelism. Now he does the individual stuff. He does like a lot of commentary videos towards not just Hebrew Israelites. He just does a lot of stuff related to Black Twitter, Black YouTube, that kind of thing. Mainly covering figures within the Black community, religious or non-religious.
Arabia Nong Pinoy says that he's from New York City. Also, thank you very much for the super chat, and I very much appreciate it. Appreciate the super chat, and I put your comment on there as well. Servant of Christ says that he saw a bunch of Ringo stuff back in the day, but they had a big kerfuffle. It was over the Elder Rufus thing, and so with the Elder Rufus thing, he was like a high-ranking guy who got removed out of their one of their joints there because he led one of their things. Right. And that's Elder Rufus right there, if you guys are wondering. And man, these are the most wild comments regarding that situation. Let's look at this situation with a fine-tooth comb. Pastor Dowell promoted you to pastor as a ploy and a smokescreen to deflect from the fact that he's been plotting to get your daughter as a bedmate. Even if Selena was infatuated with Dowell, he could have given her to a younger man as wife that would be there for her 30 to 4 years from now, incapable. Perhaps Yah had other plans, though, with that promotion, and it wasn't to stay in a place where you sincerely wasn't appreciated as a real man. He disliked that Mother Jennifer, encouraged you to take on more wives. That provoked his envy, as he wants to have the most wives in his fellowship. He disliked the fact that you're building a home, as he wants the labor of the people to benefit only what he controls. How fitting, while your home is undone, he pulls the help away, although you have helped build tons of communities through management, etc. How incredibly inconsiderate. You have an infant child to be made homeless. How dare you attempt to be a real man and make manly decisions? How dare you become too independent? So you can see there's a big dust up amongst the members with Straitway, with the situation with Elder Rufus. But a lot of people forget that years ago, Faithful, and Kalyn had mentioned this, how a lot of times Dowell has like other security, that he was at one of Ron Dalton's events there in Detroit, where he does the Great Awakening event. And at the Great Awakening event, Pastor Dowell won the Hebrew Man of the Year award. Can you tell people how that, we're not going to have time to play that video, but can you tell people how that video looked when he won the Hebrew Man of the Year?
Yeah, he was like rolling around with like detailed security. Like he was like this super duper important guy. Like, you better watch out. Dowell's coming through. Yeah, it was kind of wild, man.
So on the screen, I've got his bio from the event on the screen. So this is from a while ago, because now him and Ron Dalton aren't cool anymore. So this is back when him and Ron Dalton were cool, And Dalton gave Dowell the Hebrew Man of the Year award. But I just want to read you guys this bio of Dowell, who's the leader of Straitway. And now, after this, Faithful, I really want you to get into some of the details of the podcast. Here's what it says. Pastor Charles Dowell Jr. knows firsthand of the severity of the curses found in Deuteronomy 28. Devarim 28. For the past 28 years, he has taught thousands of believers how to get free from the oppressor that is manifest amongst us. Pastor Dowell has been married to his wife, Carol Dowell, for 35 years. That's not the only one. From the city streets of Nashville, Tennessee, to the airplanes of the United States 82nd Airborne Army Division, this man has an incomparable record in history. He's a skilled tactical veteran, a self-acquired construction builder. He is the head of 9 Israelite communities and many home fellowships scattered throughout America. He is a powerful pastor ordained by the righteous witness of his lifestyle and holiness. He has traveled much and knows much. Pastor Charles Dowell Jr. is beyond passionate about the Most High's gathering and restoration. He's a true Jeremiah 3:15 pastor, according to our Creator's heart. His life story will captivate you. Pastor's ability to deliver the message of salvation is unparalleled. Yeah, but if you actually look at it, it works. His sincere, set-apart Acts chapter 2 lifestyle is an untouchable example of his beliefs. Pastor Charles Dowell Jr. is followed internationally on his soaring YouTube channel. His online church website is captivating with hundreds of thousands of global followers. His outreach is transforming today's generation. For those of you seeking the commandments of Elohim, your lives will never be the same. You can find the proof of his pastoral excellence within the mixed multitude of Israelites at straightwaytruth.com. The 21st century has never seen a man as Yah-fearing as this. If you forget his impeccable titles, you cannot forget his integrity. Pastor Dowell is just a servant. What the?
Yeah, that's what's going on there?
Hold on. This needs some applause.
He's just a servant. But... Yeah, there you go.
The 21st century has never seen a man as Yah-fearing as this. If you forget his impeccable titles, you cannot forget his integrity. He's just a servant.
He's just a servant.
Yeah, man.
That's wild, man.
Yeah. So, interesting stuff going on with Dowell.
Double-minded man is unstable in all his ways. That's right.
And you know what's interesting, though? I mean, he's promoted those who have come out of the NFL under him, and they have actually now been able to kind of also have their kind of thing going on. And what I mean by that is, you know, Kabeer himself, the former pass rusher for the Green Bay Packers, you know, a lot of people don't know that sometimes Kabeer, he be out here speaking at these events. This is Atlanta 2019 Dry Bones Rising Conference. Here you've got Dowell, Amiri Ryder. Anybody know who that is? I'm not dissing him. I'm just saying I don't know who it is. Judah Mack, ex-IUIC guy. New Breed, don't know who that is, but I like the name. It's a former Christian rap name. Beloved Dawood. Kabeer, there's Kabeer. Haji Kolightly. Michael Norman, Bro Gideon Moshe, and of course Michael Israel. Do you know these folks, bro? Do you know these folks on this?
I do know Michael Israel. He had the channel, I believe K-Dub was on there.
What was it called? Spiritual
Combat.
Battle?
Yeah,
Spiritual Combat.
Combat.
Yeah, and he always liked to wear camouflage.
He's the guy that facilitated the debate between Ron Dalton and the Rabbi Rosenberg, Harry Rosenberg.
Yeah.
Yep. Judah Mack, potty mouth. That's all I say about him. Of course, Kabeer and some of the other guys I'm not familiar with, but certainly those gentlemen, the ones that I mean. Yeah.
So, you know, and that's not the only. I'm trying to see if this is the same flyer. Yeah, I think this is the same flyer, but it's just interesting. You know, these Hebrew Israelite events. A lot of people get caught up in the camps, but a lot more than these camps exist. You know, and you know it says all the different things that they have. Brother Gideon is defense and defense and does he work for Straitway? I have a feeling he does. Defense and safety specialist. I'm not saying he does for sure. I'm just saying looks like the other guys are artists, and so you know you get the idea. So you know there's even people under Dowell, specifically Kabeer, who are kind of got some you know things going on as well. Now, faithful, let's go into episode 1 of this podcast. By the way, shout out to Radar Apologetics. Everyone subscribe to his channel. Does good stuff. Episode 1 of this immediately dives into Kabeer's story And it's kind of heartbreaking story, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Especially, from the vantage point of the wife. For those who don't know, his ex-wife. She has 8 children, and she's sharing the beginnings of their relationship, how they met at, I believe it was at the university that they attended. Yeah, man, it was interesting to see from her perspective, because obviously we've heard his viewpoint, and unless you've read the Sports Illustrated articles, you wouldn't know, what her views are, at the very least, some of her views. But it seemed like the podcast really fleshed it out more. Like they really went in depth on, the ins and outs of their relationship early on. And from what I gathered from the first episode, Kabeer seemed to be, and correct me if I'm wrong, Vocab. I don't know if you got this feeling, but Kabeer, from what a lot of people who knew him, who interviewed him early on in his career before he got involved with Straitway Truth, he had a lot of legalistic tendencies, right? As a evangelical Christian.
People seem to feel that way. If they didn't maybe use that exact word, they did feel that he was a bit aggressive in the locker room regarding faith issues, like the one where he said something kind of odd, like, if this locker room blows up, 99%
You're all
of my
going to hell.
teammates, yeah, like 99% of your teammates are going to hell. Just kind of like, I don't know, just kind of that kind of approach to those types of issues.
Yeah, I wonder if that personality type was susceptible to falling into something like Straitway Truth. Of course, we know as Christians that it's a hard issue, right? Because of our sin nature. As I recall, the Apostle Paul mentioning in the Epistle to Timothy, of those who are ever learning but never able to come to the knowledge of the truth, that kind of thing. I wonder if men who start off like he did, it makes me wonder if this was already kind of like a condition that they were already dealing with prior to joining whatever aberrant group that they end up with. But yeah, man, I found it fascinating, though. The first episode definitely gave me a lot of insight into his background. So kind of segueing into his transition into Straitway, I could kind of see some of those elements early on. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like where it would be like he had this kind of brash approach to his sharing his faith, which is interesting. The wife details that he started off very shy, and then that shyness transitioned into an openness about his faith, but an openness that wasn't necessarily as 1 John 4-ish with love in mind, or 1 Corinthians 13, but more like turn and burn, almost like open air preachers with the whole turn and burn stuff with like, like I'm trying to think of that guy, Israel, what's his name?
Reuben Israel.
Reuben Israel. Yeah. Like that style,
And so episode 1's got a lot of heartbreaking stuff because it's not easy to hear. You don't want to hear it. And the first episode is titled The Split. I believe the first episode is simply titled, I'm looking at it, I'm trying to find
The Split.
Yeah, correct. The Split. And then we go into the next, and then the way, what it says about it is, Kabeer Gbaja-Biamila is a retired Green Bay Packer. He lives with his wife, Eileen, and their beautiful family. He had a successful NFL career. After he retired, he stayed active in Green Bay. Behind the smiling dad and doting husband facade, Kabeer was changing. He discovered a group that held his attention. It was a group that would alter the course of his family's life. And so, he starts getting into Straitway. And this came out August 27, 2024, the first episode. That's when it dropped, this Sports Illustrated series. And so that's the very first one. And then they go behind the Straitway ministry, as it were. Episode 2 is called Coach Dowell. And again, that's a really clever title to call it The Split, because not just because of the personal thing, because that's also a football term.
Right.
But then the next one is Coach Dowell. He's not actually a coach, but the understanding is there that he kind of acts as if a coach in a way, and it appeals to these these ex-NFL players. He's big, he's bold, and he's brash. People flock to him. What is it about Pastor Charles Dowell that intrigued Kabeer Gbaja-Biamila and now 2 more NFL players that Kalyn learned about? Before the NFL players found him, Dowell still pulled people in. Was it the man, his religious doctrine, or the lifestyle? If you were tapped by Dowell to move to one of his properties, what would you do? And, Dowell, though, when you do a deep dive into him, Faithful, he didn't just come out of nowhere. He didn't come out of a camp, did he, though? Where did Dowell himself come from, Faithful to God?
So he was a part of R.J. Stair's group. R.J. Stair, for those who don't know, was a
RG.
Pentecostal...
Is it RG?
RG. RG, pardon me. R.G. Stair. Yeah, he was a part of a... so he had a group that was... I guess a lot of people would equate it with like a cult.
Yeah, like specifically a doomsday cult. And I think that's an apt title because of the way they operated, this doomsday cult. And
the Overcomer Ministry.
Overcomer's Ministry. It's still around. It's under a guy named Pastor Rice now.
Yeah. For those who don't know, if you're into hip hop, the rapper Craig Mack, if you ever saw his conversion video, it was with that group, with R.J. Stair's Overcomers Ministry group.
Yeah,
so Dowell was
it's
part
unfortunate
of that
because, you see what looks like a good conversion with Craig Mack, the rapper who made Flavor in Your Ear, a famous song. And then you look at it, and then unfortunately it's with R.G. Stair, who's a false prophet and apparently a sexual abuser.
Yeah, R.G. Stair's group. Certainly the podcast, I would say what I enjoyed about it was, in particular, it wasn't necessarily this episode, it's the next episode. So
that's where they really get into R.G. Stair. So episode 3 that you referred to, it's called Little Prophet. Before there was Pastor Charles Dowell, there was R.G. Stair. Kalyn traces the origins of Straitway Truth Ministry to a group founded and led by the raspy-voiced last-day prophet of God. Following these men isn't a part-time gig for many followers that required giving up their belongings, their money, their family, and some are still unpacking what happened to them today. So what's interesting about the Straitway Truth, part of it's modeled after R.G. Stair's ministry of these self-sustaining communities out in rural areas. R.G. Stair had at least 4 of these communities that he had established. Dowell now has more, like 9 or whatever it is. And you've got R.G. Stair with these end times prophecies. There's some emphasis, I think, on elements of what looks like legalism or law keeping. And then he himself apparently modeled himself after William Branham. If you guys know who that was, another Pentecostal false prophet from the 50s and the 60s. He died in the 60s. Said he was the 6th prophet of the end times. And R.G. Stair went and then said he was the 7th prophet of the end times. And so you have these connections from Branham to Stair. So here's the whole point. Dowell's theological background is not actually Hebrew Israelism. That's something that got added on later. His background is sort of extremist Pentecostalism. That's the actual background to Straitway. Yeah. I don't know if enough people know that. What else would you want people to know about R.G. Stair and the relationship to Dowell?
So what's interesting is while he was claiming to be the 7th prophet, Dowell was being kind of groomed, and he had a nickname, the Little Prophet. So there were people in the group, in Stair's group, that were anticipating at some point, because of Stair's age, that he would pass on, that Dowell would be his successor. And he was with the group. He was an elder in the group. He grew up in the ranks. He grew through the ranks of that ministry, that cult group. And, there were people that were absolutely anticipating that he was going to be at some point the leader. And I don't know if you want us to talk about it, but there was a lot of sketchy things with Stair, with the, how do I say this without getting your channel hit? I don't want you to get demonetized.
I don't mind.
Issues with children. I'll say that. Yeah. Stair had some misconduct issues, which I think all of us should be against wholeheartedly. And I think that's when Dowell kind of saw an opportunity to kind of break off and do his own thing. Because I guess, 2 alpha males, being in this kind of cult group, it was only natural that at some point, Dowell was going to go off and do his own thing.
Let's take a look because I do think this whole thing with R.G. Stair is interesting. Now, if you're a part of Straitway and you're listening to this, I want you to understand, we are not saying that Dow is guilty by association with R.G. Stair. We are not saying that Dow is exactly R.G. Stair 2.0.
Right.
However, it should be noted the foundation that Dow came out of. And I'm going to say something. If you are in Straitway, I do want you to think about this. How is it that Dow, your leader, was able to be deceived so long by this false prophet? That's a question you need to ask yourself.
That's a good point.
And how do you know you're not currently being deceived by a false prophet under Dow's ministry, huh? I think that's something you need to consider.
That's an excellent point, man. That is an excellent point. You know, I'll say this. So the podcast did a good job of showing that, yes, there were clear, you know, obviously there are differences. You know, these guys aren't one-to-one. But Dowell, this was his teacher, and you can see the influence of Stair in Dowell's own his own congregation.
Yeah.
In fact, you and I talked about this. I believe it was 2 nights ago. We talked about Dowell's book. I believe you have his book, and you can see some of the Pentecostal influence.
Let me show real quick, everybody, the book he's referring to here, because I do have it. Ruach, the Holy Spirit. It's funny, I told a Straitway member I was reading this, and I told him how it was filled with criticisms for other churches. And my point by saying that to this member of Straitway was I was saying, hey, look, you guys are upset we criticize you, but if you read Dowell's book, it's filled with criticisms of other Christians. And then you know what he said in response? He said, well, did anyone force you to buy that book? What? I just thought that was a funny response. Like, no, they didn't, but it's still filled with criticisms, and so we can criticize back. But so that's the book. But go ahead, brother. I'm going to show this Wikipedia.
And so if you read his book, you can in that book, and you were reading portions of the book to me, you can clearly see his influence, his Pentecostal influence is still there, right? His influence from Stair is still within his current group right now. So, and what's interesting is while he shared it in the past, he seems to shy away from it these days. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe Stair's name is no longer on the property, on the Louisiana property, because I believe that was at one point and that's something that we should also mention. Straitway started off as an extension of the Overcomer Ministries. Like they were a
franchise, like a franchise.
A franchise, exactly. And then apparently now Stair's name is not on the property at all, which shows that Dowell has, I think, progressively wanted to distance himself from Stair in some capacity while still holding on to his influences, the things that I think that he was influenced by. Yeah,
so here's an excerpt from the book. This is the baptism of the Holy Spirit type of tongue, in which everyone who says they are believers should have, just like the Feast of Pentecost showed, as well as what Jesus said after his resurrection. That's sort of uber-hyper Pentecostalism. That's not even a standard charismatic position. And then look over here, page 11. This is why I continue to talk about the power over and over again. Today, people love judging you if you're wearing the right clothes, or if you have tassels on, or if you have a beard. But none of them talk about the most important part of the ministry we are in now, which is the power of the Holy Spirit. My wife and I operate in all 5 of these gifts all the time. They are only used when needed. Let me ask you a question. How many do you and your wife operate in so that the assembly can be edified? And he literally says that every church is ignorant of these gifts. Like, do you see how he sets himself up as like the one? And I have a question for you who are reading this book. When your teacher, pastor, prophet, etc. preaches, wait, let me do it like that. I have a question for you reading this book out there in YouTube land. When your preacher or pastor, prophet preaches, decide to follow him? Huh? Truly, I need to know. Wonderfully, I need to know. Are people being filled? Are they being delivered? Are they being healed? Are they set free? If not, your so-called minister is nothing more than a typical religious spirit. I truly tell you that. So you get all this kind of stuff. And it goes on and on and on with this kind of stuff. Now, let's take a look at the R.G. Stair Wikipedia entry. Because Brother Stair has some interesting stuff, you know. You can find other information, but this is not bad. 1933 to 2021, known as Brother R.G. Stair, simply his Brother Stair, was an American ministry evangelist, broadcasts preaching on digital and shortwave radio. In the 1990s, at the peak of his radio ministry, Stair was heard on 120 stations. Stair founded Overcomer Ministry in 1978, declaring himself a prophet. He lived in a community with his followers at a compound in Walterboro, South Carolina. Over the years, Stair was involved in a number of controversies, including convictions for sexual abuse, allegations that he caused infant deaths. I was reading about those allegations. They're pretty wild. I'm not saying they didn't happen, but they were like really hard to read.
Right.
And allegations that his ministry is a cult. Born in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, ordained as a Methodist, but later left organized religion, stating, quote, "I just call myself a Christian." Moved on to the South in 50s, saying that God told him to move there because it would be the safest place for Christians in the end time. That's a whole prepper, kind of vibe, which, they still kind of got going on. Right. How would you define prepper real quick? I guess I shouldn't use a term like that without defining it.
Yeah, so preppers would be these groups, they can be religious or non-religious, that believe that there's going to be some sort of collapse in the government. So they find these like kind of rural communities at times, or they may just be individuals who start stockpiling either weapons, food, different things, anticipating a kind of economic collapse. Now, in a religious sense, they're generally groups that have this kind of apocalyptic viewpoint. The end times are around the corner. So more times than not, they have a sort of, I'd say like a very dispensationalist kind of viewpoint of end times prophecy. But with the idea that the whole pre-trib rapture, that kind of thing, sometimes you have some groups that have that mindset. So they're prepping in the meantime while they quote unquote go through the tribulation, or the anticipation of going through the tribulation, if you will. So generally that's how preppers, hence the whole idea, they're prepping for like the end, hence preppers, stockpiling water bottles, canned food, or military, the processed military food, that kind of stuff, weapons, that sort of thing.
Yeah, no doubt. Shout out to Saint Ephraim. Yes, Reggie White is mentioned in the podcast. We haven't mentioned him here tonight, but he is mentioned here tonight. An Arabian says, "Wait, I missed something. He was a follower, a Brother Stair follower. I used to listen to him on shortwave radio." Well, I'm glad you stopped. Shout out to Mr. Phil Fox, Drops of Hope. Everyone subscribe to his channel as well. We got a lot of great people here. So here you got Overcomer Ministry, incorporated as the Faith Cathedral Fellowship. Pentecostal Christian organization, runs a widely heard radio-based ministry. Stair purchased a motel in South Carolina in 1978, encouraged his followers to move to the community, sell all their possessions, take a vow of poverty, and donate all that they own to Overcomer Ministry. Dowell's motto is similar to that. I'm not saying it's identical, but it is similar, and they do the whole thing where they say, hey, put your money in a pool, and the guy who's in charge of that local community, he's the one who doles it out. That is how it works. The community of about 70 strives for self-sufficiency, simplicity, growing their own food, making their own clothes. Community members live in mobile homes and handmade houses, eating community meals and gathering. For Saturday worship in the tabernacle, they dress conservatively. Women wear long skirts and men wear long pants and shirts with collars. Typically, work is divided along traditional gender lines, with men performing farm manual, women doing domestic chores. Members primarily rely on bicycles for transportation within the community. Stair objected to medical intervention and taught avoidance of doctors. Community members typically followed Stair's teaching, and in the 80s and 90s, local authorities conducted investigations after 3 infants died at the community, either during or shortly after birth.
Very similar to Dowell's group, if you think about it. Even if you could,
not the infant death, though. Not the infant death.
No,
But
no,
yes,
not the infant. No, not that
yes,
part. No,
the other things, yes. But the other things,
yeah, very, very similar in the other areas. Of course, we want to be fair. We're not trying to make a one-to-one with everything. But yeah, man, it's fascinating.
No, Faithful, you're exactly right. And that's why it's important to read this, because you kind of see, this is where Dowell got like the model from. Yes, he tweaked it, but this is where he got the model from. Myron is saying Straitway is a carbon copy of Overcomers. I hear you, Myron, but I think he tweaked it. Yes, obviously it's hey, wait, sick 'em dogs. I watched one of your shorts today. Is that you? Myron, I think you have a bunch of shorts on Dowell, Stair, and Branham, if that's the same person.
No, I know Myron. I know Myron.
Do I know you too, Myron? Do I know him? Do I know you, Myron? How do you know him? What?
So I have him added as a friend on Facebook.
Oh, well, that doesn't mean you know him.
He was primarily on Facebook. Remember when the whole Dante Fortson thing was going down?
Yeah.
He was one of the guys calling out Dante Fortson.
Oh, okay.
Around that time.
Yeah. It looks like he's done some digging into this because I looked at some of the stuff. I think he knows a lot about this as well. And so this just talks about how many, how many he's got. And check this out right here. Stair's teachings place a strong emphasis on millennial predictions of world-changing events which will result from divine judgment. In the year 1999, he said that there would be such changes at the dawn of the third millennium. Quote, if the Lord God Almighty does not make a major move before the year 2000, he said, I'll tell God to go to hell.
Wow.
Stair also received publicity over the years for several of his prophecies, including a nuclear confrontation prophesied in 1988, and that Ronald Reagan would not complete his term as president. So he's obviously a false prophet.
He's like right there with Harold Camping, huh? It's kind of crazy if you think about it.
Here he got arrested in 1963 for outraging public decency, including cursing in front of a child. I mean, I wish you could still get arrested for that. Stair, age 69, was arrested. 2 counts of criminal sexual conduct in second degree. 2 women associated with brother Stair, ages 17, 20. Allegedly, he coerced them by enforcing his religious personal beliefs on them. Sounds like that's not all he forced upon them. And then it says, Stair pleaded guilty to the charge of assault and battery, was sentenced to time served, total of 77 days in custody. And during that time, they're still broadcasting his stuff, and the 70 residents remain loyal in the 2 small branch communities. Then he got released. But no, then he got arrested again. And check this out. Stair, this is wild. Listen to this. Stair came to the attention of authorities because of YouTube videos showing him touching a 12-year-old girl's breast during service, and then saying, I'm going to touch them things till nobody else can touch them. What the heck?
Crazy.
Bro?
Yes.
Another video showed a 16-year-old girl accusing him of sexually assaulting her over a 5-month period. 4 women described assaults, including groping and rape. Stair repeatedly told the women that the acts were God's will. Released, monitored, more touching allegations. Stair later admitted to the touching allegations during production of a documentary about Craig Mack, musician that joined Stair's commune in 2011 and died in 2018.
Wait, Vocab, before you read on, I wanted to say this. I want to put this out there. I don't want to accuse Dowell of anything, but are you convinced that Dowell, when he was with the Overcomers Ministry, may have been aware of some of Stair's misgivings, at least some of his shortcomings, insofar as what we're reading, the things he got arrested over? Do you think he may have been aware of some of those things and maybe just, kept it like hush, like he basically turned a blind eye to it? Or do you think he probably wasn't aware of it? If you were to
let me say this. I have no way of knowing what he would have known because I don't fully know their relationship at that time. And I don't even know if they were on the same community because Dowell, I thought, was in charge of the Tennessee branch and Stair's over there in South Carolina. However, here's what I was going to follow that up with. If the podcast is trustworthy in its reporting, and the indications are that it is, there was a case of some kind of abuse that happened at Straitway, and Dowell's responses to these abuse allegations within his own community sounded very minimal, like it wasn't taken seriously. And so, like, it was meant to undermine the victim's testimony in some capacity. Yeah. Do you remember the exact story? Because I actually don't remember the exact story. Yeah, so but can you talk about the abuse situation there that was talked about? So during the initial Sports Illustrated article that was put out in 2020, there was a report about an anonymous person. The young woman, it was a woman, didn't want their name out there.
and they shared, their experiencing sexual abuse while with, if I'm not mistaken, it was it with Straitway while they were still with the Overcomers Ministry, or was it Straitway after that? That part I'm not
I thought it was Straitway after, and
after.
I thought
Okay,
it
that's
was
what it
one
was.
of I thought it was one of his. I'm not saying top leaders, but I thought it was someone who had some
Yeah.
kind of position, because my understanding is there was like a temporary demotion, and then the family temporarily slept in Dowell's
Yeah.
house.
Yeah, something like that. And so the woman's, I guess, her testimony was kind of downplayed, but interestingly enough, and I want to say it was in the Little Prophet, the episode called Little Prophet, which is the next one. So we can kind of segue into that one, since we're kind of overlapping a little bit. Some of the stuff we're talking about with Dowell and Stair
Yeah, it's
overlaps into
episode 3.
Little Prophet.
Episode 3 is Little Prophet. Yeah.
Yeah. So interestingly enough, there was a gentleman there where he had a family, his wife and child. They were at Straitway, and he was, talking about being bullied there. But Straitway, pardon me, Straitway / Overcomers Ministry, when he was still with them. And he talks about the abuse that he experienced, the things that he personally witnessed. And it seemed to be the case. In fact, he shared something, interestingly enough. The gentleman in question shared something interesting. I think he was in his 20s at the time when he was still listening to them on shortwave radio, and he was corresponding with Stair. And then something happened where Stair told him to get in contact with Dowell, and the guy says, "When I first met Dowell, I didn't like the guy. He thought too highly of himself. He was like real boisterous." And Dowell said to him that God had impressed on his heart that he come and join the community, right? And that essentially he said, if you don't join, then you're going to hell. And then he said, well, I need to talk to RG Stair about it. And then Stair he put him on the phone, and he pretty much confirmed the same thing. Like, if you don't come over here, you're going to hell. So it's like almost pressuring people to join their community. And then when he was there, he talked about essentially the bullying. He had a child. Apparently he left his child with one of the members, and then the child had like welts on his behind. So there seemed to be a lot of abuse going on. And we're not, for the record, I'm not saying that Dowell endorses RG Stair's the things that he did with women, but certainly the bullying, the some of that stuff seems to be consistent with what former members have said about Straitway Truth after he moved away from Stair, after Dowell was no longer affiliated with Stair. So it seems that whenever victims come forward, it's almost like their testimonies are downplayed. Are you, would you say that assessment is pretty accurate from what you've observed?
From what we're seeing, that's what it seems like. These groups are difficult though, because we're not there on the property. We're over here. There's a lot of tight-lipped. Even people that were interviewed for Spiraled, a lot of them didn't want to give their names. A lot of people didn't want to be interviewed about it. There's like this hesitancy, and it's difficult to find good, solid videos about this on YouTube. There's some things, but it's like, so.
By the way, can you show Myron's comment? He says something interesting. If Myron, his comment, he says, I'm Facebook friends with an individual who was at the Overcomers in the late 90s, early 2000s, and he says he knew Faithful. So he seems to be alluding to the idea that Dowell may have known about some of this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, so basically all I can say is Myron is saying he has a friend who knew. But it's very difficult for me to be like, therefore I knew Dowell knew. I just can't go. I'm not saying.
Of course not. No.
But these are questions, and
we want to be fair. We do want to be fair to Dowell. We don't want to falsely accuse him of anything, simply because we have doctrinal disagreements. We don't want to falsely accuse anybody. But it does open questions up in one's mind about how much he knew, what he did know, if he did know, what measures were taken. Because to be fair, the podcast pointed out that Kabeer mentioned they don't accept any abuse of women, and that if a person, is found out, they take measures to ensure that it's not going to happen twice.
Yeah, even
So
that sounded kind of ominous, though, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right.
It was like, oh, okay. So like, it's tough because we want to say they don't accept any kind of abuse. However, there's a recent story that also seems to indicate otherwise. Now, I know this is towards the end, but real quick, I want to do something before we get. That's okay. We could jump to the end part to talk about this. I'm dropping the link in the live chat. Myron, if you're able to come on in, and we'd love to talk to you. Also, we've got somebody who's also saying they used to listen to them, or people who used to be there. If you were there or used to really listen to Stare or back in a day, maybe Dow, come on in. We'll maybe talk to you. I just dropped the link. This is only for I put link for former followers. So it doesn't mean you were in the group. It just means in some way you were listening to them at some point. So if you want to come in, we may briefly talk to you. But okay, so if we go to the very end of the podcast, they kind of do an update after the podcast is over. And I think it's the episode.
Wait, before we do that, something really significant. It was in the episode called I think it was the Jezebels. And so there was a story there. And this one really stood out to me. Out of everything that I listened to, it stood out to me was the young woman named Jordan West.
Yeah.
So I heard through the grapevine. Now, this is just me doing my own research. I heard through the grapevine that she's no longer with them. But during the time that this podcast was being made, apparently she was still with the group. And the thing that stood out to me was, I believe she was 18. That was maybe in 2016 I think it was 2016 when she first joined Straitway.
When she moved to the property, but I know what you're talking about. When she first started talking to them, she was like a 15-year-old girl.
Yeah, she was 15 years old. So there's a video on Dowell's channel where I think it's his second wife is with the young woman in question. Second wife. Yeah, wife, quote unquote. And she's like, "How old was I when I first reached out to you?" And she was like 15. It's in the podcast episode, if anybody is interested. It's in the episode called The Jezebels. But that stood out to me. That was like, wow. So apparently she ended up marrying a guy who was with the group, and he was in his mid-30s. I don't want to put I think his name is Vince Rice or something like that. So she married him.
Yeah, and then you had seen a video that Jordan had done, but now that video is no longer available?
Yeah. So, well, I didn't see the video. Let me add clarity.
You saying you saw the thumbnail with the link in the description?
Yeah. So I found her father's Facebook, and it was from 2016. It was a post from 2016 where he's kind of sharing his feelings about what's going on with his daughter, and he said something to the effect of, she put out a video recently, said Jordan West is not missing. And so, the name, the reason, the way that I found his Facebook was putting that string of characters into Google. So the first thing that you see coming up in the search is this guy's Facebook post, her father's Facebook post from 2016. When I clicked on the link, the video is private. So either, I wonder if she privated the video because she's no longer with the group. She's no longer with them, and perhaps this is her way of distancing herself from them. I don't know, but I will say it is odd because in the podcast, the way that the podcast framed her involvement as an 18-year-old girl was that she was adamant that she was not going to leave. In fact, Dowell publicly made videos where he put her, remember he had like a testimonial with her where she's at the front of the congregation saying that she's never going to leave. And, she had been with them for several years leading up to this podcast being made. And, and even married a member of the group who was in his 30s when she was like 18. So odd things there about her, man. That to me was really startling. Very startling, man. Very odd things there.
Does anybody remember the video we did where we played that song about polyamory at Straitway that I don't know if it was a former member or who made it, but it was like a pretty comical, it was a pretty funny video. It was like a song that somebody had made, and it was real low budget, but it was also hilarious. Because I'm trying to remember what episode that was. I want people to find. I want to link that, but I don't remember which video it was when we did that. But man, that was that was funny when we had done that.
But what do you
go
what do you think about the woman though, Jordan West, the episode, the Jezebels, when it's because they were kind of doing the compare and contrast with the ex-wives versus, and some of the former members, like the young woman in question that we mentioned earlier, who was anonymous, versus Jordan West, who seemed to be like a devout follower, but even now, she's no longer with them. So, or well, allegedly no longer with them, based on my research. So, it's strange, right? When you think about it, if we can kind of bring it back for a second to Stare, one of the things the podcast emphasized in the Little Prophets episode was that Stare was not a fan of women. Now, I'm not saying Dowell's not a fan of women. Obviously, he has multiple wives, but just in terms of could he also be influenced by Stare's like views of women to a degree where when former members leave, especially when they're women, the whole thing is like you're a Jezebel, like Jezebel meaning you're rebellious, right? That's like the whole thing that they were leveling at the wives. Like whenever they talk about the ex-wives of these NFL players, they're automatically equated with Jezebels. I wonder if now with this woman, Jordan West, where at one point she's seen as a faithful believer, now it's like you're a Jezebel because you're no longer with us. I wonder if that's how that works. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a common thing. I mean, even with Kalyn Kahler, the second that it was coming out that she was doing this story faithful, Dowell made like a video where he was like talking about Sports Illustrated is trying to contact me, was the video of something like that. And he goes on there and immediately he like looks up pictures of Kalyn, the news reporter for ESPN and all this stuff. And he's like, oh, look at her, Kalyn with buck teeth, Becky, look like a horse mouth, or here. And, you got to wonder, how many men's DNA does she have inside her? That's what I want to know.
Wow.
How many men's? And he immediately starts talking about all this stuff, and it's like in the most vile, gross. And by the way, that is what he said. He started talking about her facial features, her appearance, and literally
men's
saying
DNA. That's crazy.
How much genetic material was inside her? That's what he really was saying. Like, because she was doing a story covering them before the story was even out.
Doesn't that go contrary to the words of Colossians 3:8, Ephesians 4:29-31, which tells believers to abstain from crude speech and inappropriate joking? And it seems that he's into that kind of thing, huh?
Oh, yeah. Well, I don't know if you remember. We did this show called, I'm looking for it right now because I want to get it right. It was called Major Beef with Dowell or something like that. Let me see. Yeah, Major Beef at Straitway versus Charles Dowell. And in that show, we showed some of the elder proceedings that they had done. Because what Straitway had done is they put up some of their actual like proceedings against Rufus. And in those proceedings, these guys are saying the B word, F, this, GD, everything you could imagine. And these are like the leaders of the church. And then they're with this real vile language in their elder proceedings. And I'm just like, what is this? There's no need for the way they were talking. But, if Dowell was going to respond to this, he might say, well, you come over Straitway. There's testosterone dripping off the walls. We're real men. I'm sorry if we don't always talk like fancy and pretty like you want. Truly and wonderful. A man needs to be able to be a man. And sometimes that might offend you. Do you think the prophets of Yah were sissies handing out flowers? No. It's like that type of thing. They excuse their lack of Christ characteristic in the name. Everything's in the name of masculinity, as if part of being masculine is controlling your daggone tongue, Dowell.
Facts.
And it's like they leave that part of out. They leave that part of it out. They just want to say whatever they want to say, and this is what they would talk like. I've challenged him to debates and whatnot, and all he does is say, this little man with the little YouTube channel who wants my attention. I could see why he wants my attention. He's a little man, and I'm a masculine man. He wants to be like Dow. But, I'm not going to give him no attention. I pay him never no mind. It's like, bro, This is the way they. This is the kind of operational spirit you get with a lot of these guys.
Okay, I can't help but feel like there are narcissistic traits with him and his former teacher, R.G. Stair, where
No, you don't say. Yeah.
no, come on, man, come on, no, but look, I think it's obvious, but I'm just saying, just the more I think about it, I wouldn't be surprised if they got clinically diagnosed with narcissism. Like, just the way they think, their mindset doesn't seem normal. Like the way that they, especially because you and I, and those of us, in the chat who are Christians, we immediately recognize the red flags. But it's fascinating how people who join their groups, who, like Kabeer, for example, who came from an evangelical background, they weren't able to spot these red flags. And could it be the case that maybe some of this stuff was up their alleyway? Maybe this is what they were looking for all along. I don't want to falsely accuse Kabeer of anything, but it's just strange to me. I find it odd. I do find it odd.
Yeah, and circling back again, I don't know if people understand how big this is with Dow in the sports world. Obviously, it's not like every NFL player is running into his arms, but it's enough that Sports Illustrated is taking notice. And it's enough that Jason Whitlock took notice. So if you guys go back to the Kyrie Irving kerfuffle, when Kyrie Irving, arguably out of all the basketball players who've ever lived, may have the best handles of any basketball player who's ever lived, honestly.
Facts.
He's definitely in the conversation. And Kyrie Irving had tweeted out the Hebrews to Negroes documentary on Amazon made by the perpetual self-promotion machine, Ron Dalton. Listen to this debate. I'm in South Africa. Buy my book. That guy. He is he when that got tweeted out, IUIC marched in support of Kyrie because obviously people said, hey, this DVD, this video, this documentary has got a bunch of anti-Semitic stuff in it. And so IUIC marched in support, walking around Brooklyn shouting and stuff. They weren't helping nobody out except for themselves. But because of that, Whitlock, who's on Fearless Radio now, one time associated with the Blaze Network or whatever, he's like, what is this? Let's find out what's going on, because he has an interest in politics plus the sports world. So he had on IUIC to be like, what are you guys about? And then Dow, I guess, through some kind of back channel, also hit up Whitlock after Nathaniel was on there and said, hey, man, there's another side to this. And Dow made a very good impression on Whitlock. He seemed like very rational, and the sports guys he brought on seemed very credible. Dow was kind of covering up some of the rough edges of their doctrine. I think Nathaniel did the same thing, but he looked really good also in comparison to Nathaniel. But my point is, I have a brief clip from that I want to show. Do you remember watching all that when he went on there, when he was on Whitlock, when he brought the NFL guys with him?
No, I'm not familiar with that one.
I'll show this is like a 47-second clip I'm going to briefly show from that.
Oh, it was before that. I mean, it really started with the whole image of God. I was one time reading, it was in 1 Corinthians 11, it says the image of God was created, that man was created in the image of God. And I don't know why I didn't notice it before, but for whatever, I believe God just allowed me to see it differently, just really see it. And I remember telling my wife, I said, did you know as a woman, you weren't created as the image of God? And it got to her. And then, so we were going back, it started in May, so we were going back and forth, kind of trying to figure out this whole, and the head of Christ, we were going back and forth, and I was trying to find videos, a pastor that said that. I think Pastor Dowell came up there, but I said, ooh, I can't use that one to sell that to her. I had to find a pastor.
So let me ask you this, KGB. You grew up in
Yeah, that's bad.
So, I like Kabeer, everyone. I like Kabeer. He's a nice guy, but this is a horrible clip. Part of what he's saying is attracted him to Dow and the seeing eye to eye is the fact that he's going around telling his wife, you're not made in the image of God. Remember guys when Kabeer came on the show and he said that the women were not made in the image of God? Now the Genesis 1 clearly says he made them male and female in the image of God. Genesis 1:26, 27. But go ahead.
Okay, real quick. Just that reasoning backfires horribly when you realize that in the Old Testament, Israel is called the daughter of Zion, or in the New Testament where the church is called the bride of Christ. So I guess by that logic, since he's not a woman, those passages don't apply to him. The bride of Christ is only the women in the Bible. Like, no disrespect, Kabeer, but that line of reasoning is exactly why we have issues with the interpretive framework of Dowell, where it's like no cultural understanding of the book. While they think that that's that's the reasoning that he can come away with, because he doesn't understand when they say sons of God, they include women as well, even though the term, because these are patriarchal societies, yes, obviously, but missing that obvious fact, saying, well, only males are made in the image of God is absurd, because Eve herself was made by God. So she's also made in his image. It's not like somehow Eve is devoid of the image of God. That's insanity to me. It's
that's
insanity
basically what they teach. That. Okay, so let's bring this up real quick. I want to show you guys the scripture here. So we're in Genesis 1. Faithful's sideways, but he's not really sideways because he's not really there. So I'll fix that. Don't worry about it. So here we are in Genesis chapter 1, everybody. You guys see Genesis chapter 1? Then God said, let us make man in our image according to our likeness, so that they, and yes, that's what it's supposed to be translated as.
That's right.
They, you guys understand? So it's they will have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the sky and over the cattle and over all the earth and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. And God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Now, here's the thing. I guess you could get away with, oh, look, see? But that's if you didn't let the text speak for itself. No, hold on. I'm not done, though, because I want people to see that it defines it right now. Because you might say, man, well, how is mankind used in this context? It's kind of like what Faithful was talking about just now. It's used to describe mankind or humankind. Because look, God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. So it's obvious the way it's defining man as in mankind, because it says male and female, he created them. 27 hammers it home to make the point that man and woman are made in the image of God. So it's obvious there. But let's go to Genesis 5. I forget the verse. What verse is it,
verse
brother?
2. It's verse 2 specifically.
He created them male and female, and he blessed them and named them man in the day they were created. Now, explain why that's important.
And the word man there is the word Adam in the Hebrew. So both male and female are categorically Adam before God. Thus, when it says Adam is made in the image of God, what it's really implying is mankind, male and female, are made in the image of God. That's insane that we're showing people how easy this is to understand within Scripture itself, and their misreading of the English of the Bible, not even bothering to look at the Hebrew or any of the context. Like this is how we properly do Bible study, and this simple thing that we're doing, Dowell, who's a pastor, has yet to actually teach his congregants. That's insane, right? When you think about it.
Yeah, and so they're out there using these arguments. I mean, what he's taught them, though, that only males are made in the image of God. Like, that's part of what they teach over there at Straitway. This is what they believe. This is what they say. This is what they do. And they would accuse us of being, like, feminized or sissified. You know, I'm a complementarian if they had understood what that meant. And so a lot of times, you know, the other side sometimes will accuse us of being like misogynistic or something just because we're complementarian, and that's not true either. Right. But it's important to understand, okay, when we look at this, what's really going on there? And it's pretty obvious. And that's why it's been a classic doctrine about the Imago Dei. You know, that's why the Imago Dei doctrine exists, that the image of God resides in all humanity. And this is beautiful because it deals away, it destroys misogyny, and I mean true misogyny, actual hatred of women. And it also destroys any kind of racist or tribal notions, because all people are made in the image of God. That's very important. Real quick, I see Myron says there are two pastors on YouTube who met in No Doubt. I'll send you their channel's vocab. They met him personally years ago. Okay, yeah, that's cool. I'd be down to check that out and see what's up with that. So what do we do? You know, because Faithful, I remember you told me, you said, man, I never really paid attention. I just thought he was like kind of a benign guy. But now you're rethinking that assessment, right?
Facts. And real quick, just so we can put it out there, hopefully we don't miss these because I know the time is winding down. If we could, the 2 episodes from Packer to Pariah and Man to Man, because those kind of go together because it's detailing, especially towards the end of Packer to Pariah, when he hired the 2 white guys to go to his children's Christmas. I think that the school was doing some sort of a Christmas play or something, and then he was totally against that. And then the whole thing of sending the guys there and they have guns, and then it leads into From Man to Man, where the guys like one of the guys was like I don't answer to like the whole sovereign citizen thing.
Yeah, when they went to court, they were pulling all the sovereign citizen tricks. Someone dropped a link. We did a show called something like Hebrew Israelites versus Wisconsin, or Straitway versus Wisconsin. Can somebody find that link, Dinu or Nate or somebody else in the live chat? And I still can't find that video. Do you guys remember the video where I played that song that someone had created about polyamory? That was like the funniest song. It's like a badly sung folk song, but it's like just really funny. Does anyone remember what episode that was? But we have a video on that. And the reason why I think it's called Man to Man is because of their language of I am man, do not understand or answer to. So it says, what happened after 2 of Kabeer Gbaja-Biamila's brothers were arrested? Kalyn ties up the loose ends in this final episode. She also tries to answer some of the unanswerable questions about Straitway Truth Ministries and finds out how Eileen and Christina are doing today. Christina was TJ Clemmings' wife. And, that really didn't end up being the last episode, because then they came back with a bonus episode or 2. And in one of the bonus episodes, it's important to understand what they said in the bonus episode. And one of the things that they said was, there's been an update. Because I think when they were recording the podcast, this hadn't happened yet. Well, what's the update? Faithful, let's tell people about the update that happened in Straitway, Indiana with Daniel Muir. Daniel Muir was formerly with the Indianapolis Colts, and he leads Straitway, Indiana. So it's interesting. This is a big thing. You think about all the Straitway campuses or whatever, one in Indiana, one in Wisconsin, and those 2 are led by former NFL players. And I think Robert Mathis is also at that one. So this is interesting, this kind of layout. You got Charles Dowell, he's in Tennessee. Then you've got Kabeer, he's in Wisconsin Straitway, Praise Land or something. And then you've got over there in Indianapolis, Daniel Muir. What happened with Daniel Muir that made the news? Faithful.
If I'm not mistaken, was it the situation with the child, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah, it was a situation with the child, right?
Yeah, I want to be careful how I say it, because you know how the algorithm on YouTube is. So I want to make sure
It wasn't SA, by the way, in case everyone's wondering. There wasn't SA, but do you want to explain what it was a little bit?
Yeah, so we'll say it was CA, but physical CA in terms of like.
Hello? Well, I'll just tell people what happened. Faithful, the idea is I'm trying to give you an end to the show where you're able to say something. Let me tell you the story of what I'm talking about here, guys. So this is back in like, let's see, June of 2024. And what you had a situation, and the child was missing. We don't know. Son of former Colts player still missing after 12 days. Silver alert declared. Now, by God's grace, fortunately, it came to be that the child was not, passed away or anything like that. And so that's obviously a good thing that we're glad about, right? But nonetheless, you did have this situation. It was pretty intense, pretty serious when it was going down, where it's like, well, where is the sun? Why isn't it showing what I needed to show here? Just a second. I don't know why it's acting this way. But it's definitely acting this way. I'm trying to show this news story. Huh? What'd you say?
Here I am. I cut out.
You definitely cut out. Okay, there we go. There we go. So I'm showing this story. This is from Fox 59. Back then, and that's the child. There's the property right there. ISP contacts Bryson Muir's parents, and he was missing. Now, like I said, they got him, so he wasn't dead or anything like that. But they're showing when they busted in there, and he had this black eye, and not cool. And the parents stopped cooperating with the police. The parents are Daniel Muir and Kristen Muir, and there was a lot of considerations and concerns with the situation because he was missing, and when he showed up, he's got a black eye, and so obviously this is a problem. So there's an investigation, and there is Goshen. So this is Goshen, I guess, is what they call it or whatever. And they're using the term now, Servant Leaders Foundation, instead of Straitway for the official thing. But then it says, welcome to Straitway, Indiana, Goshen. And then you can go in there, and then they have stuff on, that's Daniel Muir. That's Daniel Muir right there. And so this is an ongoing investigation there.
Right.
Now, like I said, they found him, but this became part of the podcast because they covered it at the end. But what do you want to add to that?
Yeah. Well, number one, I wonder, relevant to what we were talking about earlier with the sovereign citizen stuff. It seems that initially, when the discovery happened, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like Straitway was attempting to downplay the situation. They were kind of trying to minimize the severity of what happened. And it seems to be the case that they look at it as they are a self-governing organization where they don't feel that they need outsiders to interfere with any of the things that they're doing, right? And so, much like with the two young men when they were arrested, remember the police were asking them, simple questions, and they're like, "Oh, I don't answer. Talk to me man to man. I only answer to the state of man. I am man." Like that kind of thing.
Sovereign citizen stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. I wonder if some of that is contributing to this situation as well, where perhaps the organization itself is obviously like anti-government. So if any authorities decide to intervene in any of their matters, they're looking at it as let's not give them anything. Let's just I don't know, that stuff to me though with the child, really sad stuff. I think it speaks to the wider problem as a whole. It certainly speaks to the issues that they have because of this kind of wonky interpretive framework that Dow has introduced, partly inspired by Stair, and and also partly, by the way, was Stair himself, does anybody know if Stair himself was influenced by the sovereign citizen stuff? If he did it?
Yeah, I don't know if that stuff was popping off real like that back then, but that's an interesting question. So there you see us as of July 12th, that they're out of jail on bond. But, this is the situation. And, he got arrested after the son was found. And now they're being investigated. So he faces charges of domestic battery, Class A misdemeanor, obstruction of justice, which is a felony. So this is serious stuff. This is the leader of Straitway in Indiana. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, okay, what are we looking at here? And this, like I said, happened after the stuff happened with the podcast. So they included it in the podcast, but it wasn't in the episodes. It was sort of after they had wrapped up, but it is included in there because of the bonus episode or whatever. Yeah, but I mean, this is serious stuff. Faithful, what are your predictions for the future? But real quick, I just want to read this. Eventually, police gathered enough evidence, including a reported confession where Daniel said he whooped his son's ass like a grown-ass man. I mean, my goodness. But
crazy.
What do you
I foresee that given the sort of community that they're building, and I want to be careful in how I say this, right? Because as Christians, we put a high degree of precedent on the guidance of the Holy Spirit, but obviously the guidance of the Holy Spirit, biblically speaking, and I'm saying this because I sincerely believe this about this group. It doesn't reflect what these people believe in, and Dowell specifically, what he believes in. What he's teaching is based on a distortion of the scriptures and a lack of guidance from the Holy Spirit. What I would say though is, unfortunately, because of the anti-intellectual nature of the group, not that we're saying intellectualism is like the weight, if you will, but clearly if you're being led by the Holy Spirit should be guiding you into a proper understanding of the Bible, which they lack. I think because they attract people who have this kind of desire to belong to a community of sorts, that they'll continue to exist until something really big happens, like something explosive, some grand, like think of it as the guy Malachi Z. York. Like, until an expose happens with the leader, we're going to continue seeing this group be around, only because deceived people are easily deceived. Obvious. I mean, it's, that's why you have a million of these different false groups that have these false teachings with a code of personality figure like a Dowell. So I really foresee this continuing. However, it could be possible, and I think the podcast alluded to this, given their personality types, because you have like 3 or 4 alpha males in that group, Kabeer being one of them, Dowell obviously being the main leader, that you could see at some point, maybe it could be the case, maybe it might not be the case, but you could see Kabeer leaving to start his own group independently of Dowell, but with the same mindset, the same rules, everything else. So you almost have like a Dowell, the Stair thing, where he leaves Stair, he starts his own group. Kabeer could potentially leave and start his own group. The other guys can leave and start their own group, or they could probably stick it out unless something really, really controversial happens where there's some sort of, something SA related or something really big, really explosive, I think, though, it's more than likely that they're going to continue, and we're going to be dealing with this and other like-minded groups until the return of Christ, unfortunately. That's why a lot of us as brothers and sisters, we should keep guys like Kabeer, even Dowell, all these people in prayer, that the Lord would touch their heart and hopefully, Lord willing, pull them out of this deception.
Yeah, 100%. Brother Ruben is in the live chat and says he wants to talk to me. You sound like you're part of Straitway. I'm not saying you are, but the stuff you're saying sounds just like somebody who would be from Straitway. Tell me more about yourself and what you want to talk about and what you got going on there. Warrior Woman, remember that video we did on Dow where I played that song on polyamory and it was pretty funny? Do you remember what live stream that was or when that was? That's something I cannot find on my channel. No one's been able to find it. I'm hoping we can. All right, well, Straitway, tell us what you got going on next, my man.
Faithful, not Straitway.
Oh, sorry. Did I say that? I was reading. I was reading while I was
see,
talking.
Dowell got you deceived a little bit too, Volk. Yeah, look at that. You see?
I was
Dowell
reading
magic.
My bad. Yeah, Faithful. What do you got going on coming up, man?
So, I'm just going to keep doing my thing. I think this is motivating me to pay much closer attention to their group. Perhaps there will be some live streams in which I will be covering some of their false teachings, going over their misinterpretation, and, doing something similar to what we did here with Genesis, where we pointed out where Kabeer is just fundamentally wrong in his interpretation. Dowell obviously fundamentally wrong because he's the one teaching his members this nonsense, this misunderstanding of the Bible. Because we wholeheartedly, on your channel and my channel, we believe in the Bible, but we want people to believe in it properly, according to how the biblical authors would have understood it, the churches that they established understood it, because their understanding reflects what the Holy Spirit was leading the church into, versus what Dowell and these guys are doing. It seems like this is no different than other, false groups. So, so I do plan on covering some more of this stuff, and I appreciate you for putting me on to Spiral. And the podcast, I think, really will help people understand the importance of this and why urban apologetics, why what we do is important, because these issues, even a group like this, a moderate group, It's important to understand these groups because they're suckering people into these cults.
Yep.
Essentially.
Amen, brother. And, people pay attention. If you've been watching this channel, you know more about Straitway than the average person does. But these issues are not just relegated to a corner like maybe people thought they once were. You have Straitway on the mainstream radar. I understand it's not the talk of the town, but it's a multi-part podcast series put on by Sports Illustrated. That's a major sports media outlet, obviously. That's a big deal. And you've got these things popping up in the news. You have the involvement of former NFL players. Again, that's a big deal too. I hope people understand, this is a big deal stuff. And so these issues aren't going to go away. And there's all these different types of groups. We're trying to educate and inform. If we get something wrong, we'll try to walk it back. But I'd be very willing to talk to publicly or debate people from Straitway. I don't know. They're not really into that too much. But at the same time, I'd be down to do it. Or if they wanted to come on and share their side of the story, we can make that happen too. So just let me know. And I appreciate you guys being here. I'm going to play a final video. Going to end the show with this. Oh, okay. Okay, I'll look for that, Myron, then. A final video, it's where Dowell's talking about how he's defending Kabeer and Daniel Muir, and it's like a 4-minute video, but we'll end the show with this. I think it's pretty good, and I think you guys will appreciate it. So it's just going to be Dowell talking. Here, let me just grab this video and put it on the screen.
Oh, it was before that. I mean, it really started with the whole image of God. I was one time reading, it was in 1 Corinthians 11, it says the image of God was created, that man was created in the image of God. And I don't know why I didn't notice it before, but for whatever, I believe God just allowed me to see it differently, just really see it. And I remember telling my wife, I said, did you know as a woman, you weren't created as the image of God? And it really got to her. And then, so we were going back, it started in May. So we were going back and forth, kind of trying to figure out this whole image of God. She felt like, no, we're equal. I said, no, it says the head of every man is Christ, and the head of every woman is man, and the head of Christ is God. We were going back and forth, and I was trying to find videos, a pastor that said that. I think Pastor Dowell came up there, but I said, I can't use that one to sell that to her. I had to find it.
Here's the video I was talking about. It's a 4-minute video, and I think you guys will hear a lot from this. Let's check this out.
Gbaja-Biamila explained to the Green Bay Gazette that anyone who embraces Straitway belief system is an Israelite. What does the book say in Romans? One expert on Hebrew Israelism, I don't know what that is, but that's what they purport, who professionally goes by the name Vocab Malone. That is not an expert. That is an independent, ignorant man that just has a very small YouTube channel that's looking for a platform. He's looking for a platform in order to try to get his name out there. Vocab Malone. Are you serious? Said he has engaged with some of Straitway members, and his message, Malone wrote a primer on the Hebrew Israelism called Barack Obama versus the Black Hebrew Israelism. Anyway, they are not going to go out and hurt anybody. They're not about that. They're not going to stand on the street corner. They're not going to harass people, Malone said. Or at least they got that right if he said that. They're about independent, self-sustaining community that is ready for the end times. That's pretty much true. But he did point that Straitway emphasizes guns and hyper masculinity. Jesus. Does the police emphasize guns? Do you have guns in your homes out there? I'm asking all y'all. And do you not believe that a man ought to be masculine rather than effeminate or feminine? Whatever. I guess he says that because, after all, you look at him, he's kind of a soft and feminine man. And you look at me, after all, I'm this dreaded paratrooper. At least I did serve my country for 10 years. After all, I jumped out of planes, rappelled out of helicopters. I served my country for 10 years. And for that, I'm demonized. I guess I'm hyper masculine. Isn't that amazing? But the United States of America didn't mind people like me being hyper masculine when we had to defend the sovereignty of this country, didn't we? Against all enemies, foreign and domestic. No, they don't mind that, though, do you? I would not want to be a law enforcement agency that decides to go in there if a law enforcement agency ever does decide to roll up on them because they do weapons training. Damn skip, we do weapons training. Law enforcement agencies do weapons training. But there ain't going to be no reason for nobody to roll up in here. But we are prepared for anything. After all, Don't they say against all enemies, foreign and domestic? I know the reason why that law enforcement agencies and all them are not scared of the Ku Klux Klan, because the majority of them are Ku Klux Klansmen. I mean, it's it. They do what they call self-defense training, Malone said. Yeah, we do. Yeah, sure do. Everything that my special forces learned while we were in the military, we make sure we teach our people everything we know. All of them. Because this world is crazy. Y'all don't see some of the things that go on here in Tennessee? How many people get shot and killed for no reason at all, just for going to the convenience store? No, you ain't got to worry about us. We're not one of them, these what you call it, religious communities that we just go out and do sick things. No, we don't do it. We don't have pedophiles like they do in Washington, D.C. We don't believe in pedophilia. We don't believe in homosexuality. We homeschool our children. Isn't that beautiful? We don't want our children around these confused children out there in the public school system who they're teaching to use condoms in the kindergarten. Well, we're separatists concerning that. Reach Harley Meyer and the Tennessee at 615-259-8241 and on Twitter. Why don't y'all call Harley? 615-259-8241. That's 615-259-8241 and on Twitter at Harley A. Meyer, M-E-Y-E-R. Y'all get out there and contact Harley Meyer, okay? Give her some attention, okay? Other than that, bless y'all. That's the whole